Masechet Kiddushin, Daf Nun Bet. We saw a story about a man who goes and takes some produce from someone else's land, but it's shivi'it, and then he goes and offers a basket of those figs from that land to 5 women, 2 of whom are sisters. And the sages said that the 2 sisters are not mikudashot because you cannot do Kiddushin to 2 sisters simultaneously. It does not take effect. So we're now going to see all the things that we learned from this story. Maaseh b'chamesh nashim amarav shema'amina mimatnitin arba v'nakit Rabbi de telat. Rav says that we can learn 4 things from this Mishnah, although he only held in his hand 3. In other words, 3 he knew for certain. The 4th one he was uncertain about. Shema'amina hamikadesh beferot shivi'it mikudeshet. Number 1 is if you do Kiddushin with some produce that you picked up during a Shivi'it year, then the Kiddushin is good. During a Shivi'it year, no one is allowed to cultivate or guard any land, even if it's their own land. Rather, it's free for anyone. Whatever grows by itself is free for anyone to take and eat. But you can't hoard or sell or buy or anything like that. So you might have thought that maybe this food that's free for all is free for eating, but maybe that you can't, just like you can't do transactions, you can't sell it. We might have thought that you can't do Kiddushin with it. And so the Mishnah teaches that it's okay, you can do Kiddushin, right, yours to eat or to benefit from in this way. So yes, you can take some free fruit and then it's yours, and you can do Kiddushin to a woman and it works. Ushma mina kiddusha begezel ena mikodeshet afilu begezel dida. Second thing we learn is that if a man steals something and then offers it to her, that Kiddushin, as for Kiddushin, the Kiddushin is invalid, even if he stole it from her. Well, it's for sure if he steals it from someone else, it's not his. He can't give something to someone else that doesn't belong to him, right? That's not actually giving. You might have thought that in the case where he stole it from her and then gives it to her, if she accepts, that means she's relinquishing her rights to it, so that she makes by accepting it, right? She has a right to say it's okay, it's yours, right? I have yeush, and you don't have to return it, and that makes it his. And therefore, when he gives it to her, he is giving it to her. So you might have thought that it works. And so the Mishnah has come to teach that if he stole it from, even if he stole it from her, it's still he can't do Kiddushin with it. How do we see that in the Mishnah? Mishnah mentions that it was of their field, it belonged to the field of the sisters, and it was Shivi'it. So the only reason why it would be good, that it could possibly be a good Kiddushin, and then the Kiddushin for the sisters, not because they're sisters, but the other women are, the Kiddushin does work for the other 3 unrelated women. So the reason why the Kiddushin is valid is because it's Shivi'it, and during Shivi'it it's Efket anyway, so therefore it's not stealing. But if it was during any other of the 6 years of the Shemitah cycle, when it did belong to them and he stole it, then there would be no Kiddushin possible at all, not even for the other women. Okay, Ushma mina isha na'aset shalich lechaberta v'afilu b'makom shena'aset la sara. The third thing we learn is that a woman can be a messenger, an agent to accept Kiddushin for her friend, even if that will make her a rival wife, so that the woman who's accepting it, she's accepting it both for herself and as a messenger for someone else. You might have thought that, well, no, nobody wants a rival wife, so the messenger would accept it for herself, but she may not agree to. She may say, yeah, I'll accept it for you, but then in her mind she said, no, I don't want a rival wife, I'm not accepting her behalf. You might have thought that. So this Mishnah teaches that no, nevertheless, if she accepted that she'll be a messenger, and then she will do her duty, even though that means she's going to have a rival wife, but that still is a valid messenger. So that's the 3 things that we know for sure Rav learned. V'idach maihi, what's the 4th thing that Rav wasn't sure about? Kiddushin she'en mesurin lebi'ah. Regarding Kiddushin that cannot be consummated, there's something wrong, like in this very case where it's 2 sisters, and if you would allow the Kiddushin to go through, and he now has Kiddushin to 2 sisters, a problem, because he can't do bi'ah with either of them, because that would be the sister, the sister of his wife. And so Rava said Kiddushin, Shen Misun Lebiyah is not Kiddushin. So that's the fourth thing that you can learn from here. In fact, that's what Rava learned, right? Brought a proof from this very Mishnah to this fact. Okay, V'nich Sheva. So why doesn't Rav count this? Because this is a good thing. This Mishnah is an appropriate application of this rule, or appropriate source even for this rule. And the answer is Mishum Demisapekale, Ike Abaye, Ike Rava. Rav was not sure if the halacha follows Abaye or like Rava. Right? Rava gave this reasoning. There are other ways we as we saw yesterday, to explain the rule in the Mishnah. So he wasn't sure if the halacha follows Abaye and Kiddushin Emisun Lebiyah is Kiddushin, or like Rava, that is not Kiddushin. Of course, Rav is a first generation Amora, Abaye and Rava are fourth generation Amoraim, so it's not that Rav could possibly be debating whether we should follow Abaye or Rav. Rav never met. He died before Abaye and Rava were born. Nevertheless, the point is that he could be debating the same issue, right? Even if it was not in the name yet of Abaye or Rava, Rav could have thought of the same law. Okay, Kisalik Rabbi Zera Amara lahashmata kamed Rabbi Yochanan. When Rabbi Zera went from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he heard the statement of Rav that we learned these 3-4 things, and he said it to Rabbi Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael. Amar lemi Amar Rav Hachi, and Rabbi Yochanan exclaimed, "Did Rav really say that?" Now, at first, we understand that Rabbi Yochanan is exclaiming it as in a negative way, like, I can't believe he would have said that. There's no way, like he's disagreeing. So then we say, Vehu lo amar, wait, but didn't Rabbi Yochanan say the same thing? Va amar Rabbi Yochanan, Gazal, velo nityachu ha'be'alim, shenehem enam yicholim lahakdish. Ze lefi she'eno shelo, veze lefi she'eno b'rishuto. Rabbi Yochanan said a similar thing regarding the law of not being able to marry someone with stolen property. The Rabbi Yochanan said a similar law that if someone stole money, then and the owner did not yet give up hope of finding it, then neither party can make that item hekdesh. The thief, because it's not his, right? The owner still owns it because it's stolen, right? And he is still has hope in finding it. So there's no way that the thief can make hekdesh, something that is not his, and the owner also cannot make it hekdesh because it's not in his possession and it's not there to be able to make it hekdesh. So neither can make it hekdesh. What you see from here, but we can extend the same logic that a thief should not be able to use something he stole for Kiddushin. Just like he can't use it for Hekdesh, he can't use it for Kiddushin, because in order to do Kiddushin, he has to give something that he owns to her that she receives, and he doesn't own this because it's stolen property, and we presume she did not make Yush. So Rabbi Yochanan is actually agreeing. Why did he exclaim? Hachika amar le, mi amar Rav kevati. Yeah, Rabbi Yochanan exclaimed in happiness. He's like, wow, I can't believe Rav said the very same thing that I thought of. I'm so honored, right, to have, right, Baruch shekivanti, that I said something, and now Rav said the same thing, so he exclaimed out of agreement. Okay, me'tive. Now we have an objection to Rav's opinion that you cannot use stolen property, because we have a Tosefta that teaches Kiddusha begezer bechamas ubegeneva o shechataf sela miyadaha v'kiddusha mekudeshet. If someone does Kiddushin with some item that is robbed, a forced transaction, thievery, or he grabbed it from her and did Kiddushin, in all these cases, the mekudeshet, it works. So Rav, how come you said that if he stole it from her, not mikudeshet, and here it says it is mikudeshet? And the answer is hatam begezel dida. There in this baraita is talking about that he stole it from her. All the cases are they stole it from her. Because he stole it from her and then she accepted it as Kiddushin, it means that she relinquished her rights to it. She forgave him and says, it's okay that you stole this, you don't have to return it. And therefore, by releasing him, it becomes his, and then he gives it to her. That's why it's okay. Whereas in the Mishnah, that was not the case. In the Mishnah, Rav's statement that he learned from the Mishnah was a case when she did not steal it from her. Now, this is really not so clear. Hold on, in this very braita, right, there's 4 cases. The last one is or he stole it from her hand. So we can infer that the first three cases is that he stole it from someone else, right? Not that he stole it from her. We answer, no. Perusheka mefaresh kiddusha begezel bechamas ubegneva. Kesad kegon shechataf sela miyada v'kiddusha bo. The last example is not a fourth example, but rather is a commentary explaining the first three examples, right? If a thief stole, forced, for example, that he stole it from her hand. But in fact, all the cases is that he stole it from her. That's when, if she accepts it, it's okay. But if the guy steals it from a third party, that's definitely not his, because we assume that third party did not consent and give in and have Ye'ush and release him. So in those cases, it would not be good. And that is the statement that Rav had said. Hold on. But you can't make this distinction because then the Mishnah itself was talking about a case where the guy stole it from her. And Rav learned from that case that the Kiddushin is not good, which means that Rav would say, even if he steals it from her, the Kiddushin is not good. So the answer that you just gave does not resolve the contradiction. And the answer is La Kashya, Ha de Shadich, Ha de la Shadich. The case of Rav, that Rav was talking about, that said, when he said it's okay, it's good Kiddushin when he steals it from her, that's when they had made arrangements for the marriage beforehand. They already went out on dates, and the parents already met and decided you're going to pay for this part of the wedding, I'm going to pay for that, we're going to donate, we're going to give these gifts and those gifts, and they already arranged the wedding. So there, we assume that she is agreeable to it, and so when he steals money from her and gives it to her, and she accepts it, that is acceptable. That's what the Braita was talking about. Whereas Rav, when he said it's no good, that's when there was no Kiddushin beforehand. He just went up to a woman, maybe they met, maybe they didn't meet, but they didn't arrange a marriage yet, and he steals something for her and gives it to her. That's the case of that Rav assumes in the Mishnah, where he rules that the Kiddushin is not valid. Okay, now a couple of stories. A woman was washing her feet in a vessel of water. And I guess she was looking pretty when she did that. So some guy came along and grabbed some coins from some other person, a third party, and threw it at her and said, Amar la mikadasht li, right? I would like you to be mikudeshet to me with these coins that he just stole. Is that valid? So this guy who did this then later went to Rava to see if it would be good. Rava said, it's no good. You are not married, because nobody considers the opinion of Rabbi Shimon to be correct, who says that in a standard case of ordinary robbery, the owner despairs. Rabbi Shimon thought that, well, most people, once they're robbed, they're like, forget it, I'm never going to find it again. If you would follow Rabbi Shimon, then we can assume that this guy who stole money from someone else, that other guy, who the victim of the robbery, would say, I lost the money, what can I do? And therefore, it would be the robbers, and then the Kiddushin would be valid. But that's a minority opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and nobody is even concerned, not even lechomra, that you have to worry about that. Rather, there is no Kiddushin at all in this case. Hahul arisa dekadesh bemoza de shachme atalekame de rava. He had a sharecropper. A sharecropper shares, right, with the owner of the field. He takes a certain amount of what he produces, and the owner takes a certain amount. So this guy, he did Kiddushin with a handful of onions. He picked a handful and he gives it to some woman. Now, technically, it's kind of stolen because he didn't get permission from the owner to take these onions, although in the future he will get a share of the onions. So it's a complicated case. They came to Rava, Amar le man achalach. He said, who relinquished these onions to you? Right? Nobody. The owner didn't let you take them, so they're stolen goods, and therefore the Kiddushin is invalid. That was his ruling. But now we comment, V'hanemile bemoza, aval kisha maseh amar le, ana shekle kisha, shakil at kisha, kisha. That's only if he took a little handful. A handful has to be at least worth a peruta, but it's the point point is that it's such a little bit that we don't expect that the sharecropper is going to pay it back or deduct it from his share, because it's just he took a little bit. So that's why it's considered stealing. But if he takes a whole bundle of onions, a fixed amount, that's a significant amount, and he gives it to the woman, and then it's actually better, because then the assumption the sharecropper would say, here, I took this 5-pound bundle of onions, and you take a 5-pound bundle of onions from my share. And so this would not be stealing, since the sharecropper does have a share coming to him, and he took a whole measured, big, nice bundle, and so that the assumption is that, yes, they will just trade. So it's not stealing. Whereas when you just take a little bit, it's not a fixed amount, just a pinch. That's a handful. That is not sufficient to be considered a real amount, and then that would be stealing. Hahu seya de kadesh befruma de shichra. Now, last story of a brewer. He's making some date beer for someone else, and he does Kiddushin with this sediment from the beer, right? Some leftover part of it, and he gives that. But it's worth something, so he does Kiddushin with that. But it's not his, because he's just doing the work, the labor. All the beer and the sediment belongs to someone else. Now the owner comes and sees him doing this. So why are you giving him this second-rate sediment of the beer? Why don't you give him this nice sharp sediment that's even better quality than the one you chose? So here's the question. The owner of the beer, is he accepting and saying, yeah, you should get even better? That means he agrees to give him the sediments, and the Kiddushin is valid. Or is he just being rhetorical here, and really it's his, and he objects, and he did not give the brewer these sediments, and does not want the Kiddushin to happen. And therefore, this is stolen goods, and the Kiddushin is not valid. All right, another complex question. So they came to Rava. Amar lo amru kelach esel yafot ela linan teruma bilbad. He said Kiddushin is no good. The only time that we apply the principle that if an owner said, oh, you should have taken the better one, then we assume that he agrees, is in a case of teruma, which we'll see in a second. But in any other case, including this one, even though the owner came back and said, oh, you should have taken the better stuff and given it to her, we don't think that he's saying it sincerely. He's saying it sarcastically, or because he doesn't want to embarrass the guy, but he doesn't really mean to relinquish. So what is this one case where we do accept his words? A case of teruma. Detanya. Kesadamru torem shelo midat terumato teruma. In what case do we say that someone goes and separates teruma from someone else's produce without his knowledge, without his agreement? The teruma is good. See, if with agreement, of course. If I have a pile of produce and I'm not around, I want to ask someone else to do it. Can you go and take teruma for me? Yes, he can go do it. But in this case, you have some, friend that sees this pile and says, oh, my friend has this pile, he didn't take teruma. I'm going to do him a favor, and I'm going to go separate teruma on his behalf without his knowledge. Is that good? So here's the case where it's good. So a friend sees his friend's field a pile of produce, and he goes in there and he takes and separates. He's not stealing. He just separates the teruma on his behalf, so that way now anyone who eats it or takes it will not be violating teruma. Now, if he's suspected that he's stealing, then the teruma is not good. But if the owner would not suspect him of stealing, then the teruma is valid. Now, how do you know if he suspects him of stealing or not? Oh, we could test it out when the owner comes back and he says, oh, why'd you take this produce? You should have separated even better produce to give to teruma. I would have wanted to give even more, even higher quality. Now, if there was actually higher quality than the one that he took, then that means he meant it sincerely, and the teruma is good, right? In this case, the other guy's doing him a favor by taking teruma, and the guy comes back is, oh, yes, very good. thank you for doing that. You know what? I would even want to give better quality. If there's better quality, that means sincere. If imlav and teruma, but let's say there's no actual better quality, and he comes back and says, oh, why don't you give even better quality stuff? But there is no better quality. That proves that he means it sarcastically. He comes back and says, so what are you doing? Right? Well, who asked you to separate teruma on my behalf? Right? Why don't you take better quality? Like, go take more of my stuff. So then that's called suspected of stealing, and the teruma is not valid. In either case, if the owner comes back and says, oh, you only put this much teruma, there's no fixed amount for teruma, so you can give more. And if the owner comes back and says, oh, I want to put more, put some more teruma, that means for sure, no matter what, no matter whether there is better or not better, that shows that he is acceptable, that someone else did teruma on his behalf. He's so accepting that he says, you didn't even do enough, I'm going to add even more. And so that's valid. Okay, so in the case of teruma, when someone does something on their own, that's valid. But in all other cases, not so. In this case, when the owner of the beer comes and sees that the brewer took some stuff and used Kiddushin with it, and he says, you should have taken better sediment, he only said that because of embarrassment. There's two ways to understand it. Either because the owner wanted to embarrass the brewer and said, what are you doing taking these sediments that belong to me? Why don't you take even better ones? He's causing embarrassment. Or because, a nicer way of interpreting it, he didn't want to cause the brewer embarrassment and come and say, hey, those are mine. How dare you do that? The woman's right there. She just got Kiddushin. They're all happy. He doesn't want to embarrass her at the moment. So embarrass him at the moment. And so he says, oh, you know what? Very nice. I'm so glad you took my stuff, and you should have taken even better stuff. So he wants to save the embarrassment, but he doesn't really mean it, and really does not want to give over his stuff without permission, and therefore the Kiddushin is not valid. We just spoke about doing Kiddushin with something that's stolen from another person, and the next Mishnah is going to be about doing Kiddushin with something that is hekdesh, or holy in some way, basically stealing from Hashem and using that money to do Kiddushin. Does that work? Hamikadesh bechalko ben kodshe kodashim ben kodshe kalim ena mikudeshet. Someone who does Kiddushin with his share of a sacrifice, whether it's kodshe kodashim, that would be like an korban olah or hatat. Kodshe kodashim are eaten only by kohanim and only in the Bet HaMikdash itself. So even though they divvy it up and this kohen gets a certain share, so in some sense it's his, but it doesn't belong to him. It's his, meaning he has a right to eat that, but if he gives it to a woman as Kiddushin, it's not valid because it doesn't belong to him. Not only for Kodshe Kodashim, but even Kodashim Kalim, which are eaten not only by Kohanim, but even non-Kohanim can eat Kodshe Kodashim Kalim rather, like a Korban Todah, Korban Pesach, that people can eat in Yerushalayim. That also does not belong to the person themselves. People have a right to eat it if they eat it in sanctity, but taharan, and with all the proper rules, they're allowed to eat it, but they don't own it, and therefore if he gives it to a woman as Kiddushin, the Kiddushin is not valid. B'ma'aser sheni ben shogeg ben ezid lo kidesh b'meir. Ma'aser sheni, I have some produce that I grew, and I have to bring it to Jerusalem, either the produce itself, or I could redeem it for money. So that produce, although in some sense it belongs to me because I can go and eat it in Jerusalem. I can eat it all by myself. That's Ma'aseh Sheni. Nevertheless, it is in fact restricted, and according to the B'meir, it doesn't actually belong to me. Once I separate that Ma'aseh Sheni from the rest, it actually belongs to Hashem. I have permission to eat it in Jerusalem. That's what it's used for, just like Ma'aseh Rishon, a Levi can eat it, and so on. So I have permission to eat it, but it doesn't belong to me. Therefore, whether I didn't realize that this was Ma'aseh Sheni when I gave it to a woman, or I did realize and did it on purpose, the Kiddushin is not valid because I don't own Ma'aseh Sheni. So far, these are all the same. Although these are things that someone has permission to eat, it doesn't belong to him, so therefore you can't do Kiddushin. Rabbi Yehuda omer b'shogeg lo kidesh b'mezid kidesh. Rabbi Yehuda, however, makes a distinction and says if he does it by mistake and didn't realize it was Maaseh Sheni, then it's no good. But if he does it on purpose, then it's okay. And Gemara in the future daf will explain why. Ubehekdesh. Let's say something is made consecrated. Have some coins or some item, and I say this belongs to the Bet HaMikdash, and then I go and give it to a woman as Kiddushin. B'mezid Kiddush. If he did it on purpose, it's good Kiddushin. B'shogeg lo Kiddush. By mistake, I didn't realize it was Hekdesh, it's not good. According to Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda omer b'shogeg Kiddush, b'mezid lo Kiddush. Rabbi Yehuda says the opposite. If it by mistake, then the Kiddushin is good. If on purpose, then the Kiddushin is not good, and the Gemara on the future daf will explain that machloket. Nema matnitin to look at Rabbi Yosef HaGalili. It seems at the beginning of the Mishnah here, regarding sacrificial meat, is not the opinion of Rabbi Yosef HaGalili. The Tanya ma'al bahashem lerabot kodashim kalim shehen mamono dibre Rabbi Yosef HaGalili. So, because according to Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, when the pasuk says regarding korban me'ila ma'al bahashem, this is a korban that someone brings because he swears falsely regarding some property. He says that it's mine when it's not really his, and it says here ma'al bahashem. Hashem. One of the examples is something that he trespasses against Hashem. So this is referring to, according to Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, this is referring to Kodashim Kalim, some animal that's designated to be a Korban Todah. And then someone swears falsely and says, no, this is mine. It's not designated to be a Korban Todah. Rabbi Yosef HaGalili says that that person is also liable. Now, why should he be liable for swearing about something that belongs totally to God if this type of Korban is only for something that I lie about stealing from another person? So therefore, according to Yosef HaGalili, it must mean that Kodashim Kalim, that's owned by a certain person, actually belongs to that person, right? Even though he designated it as Kodashim Kalim, nevertheless, he also retains personal ownership over it. So according to the Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, if someone would take some Kodashim Kalim that he owns and do Kiddushin with it, the Kiddushin should be valid because he thinks that Kodashim Kalim is in fact owned by the owner. It's just that it's something holy and so has restrictions on its use. So the Mishnah, which says that any kind of Kodashim Kalim you cannot do Kiddushin with because the person doesn't own it, must not be to be Yosef HaGalili. And we answer because we don't want to restrict the Mishnah not to be like a certain view. Afilu tema to be Yosef HaGalili, ki kama to be Yosef HaGalili mehaim aval achar shechita la. No, the Mishnah can even accord with Rabbi Yosef HaGalili. He only said his opinion while such an animal is alive. We have a live animal here that someone designated to be their Korban Pesach. And then someone lies about it and says, no, that's not Kodashim Kalim, it's mine. And he swears about it falsely. While it's alive, it is owned by a person. And therefore, that guy who's swearing falsely is swearing about Kodashim Kalim, but is swearing against someone because he's saying that person's property that is designated by him as his Kodashim Kalim, he's saying is not his and belongs to me, and so therefore is Chayav Korban. That's only when the animal's alive. However, after he brings that animal to the Bet HaMikdash and does Shechita, then they do the process, whatever the process is, and the Kohanim or the owners get the meat that they can eat. At that point, it is totally Hashem's. My ta'ama ki kazachu meshulchan gaboa kazachu. That point, it totally belongs to Gaboa, the mizbeach, the table of the Most High, meaning it all is holy and belongs to Hashem. And the rule is that Hashem says, you know what, you can share with me, and you, the Kohanim or the owners, whoever's going to eat this Kodashim Kalim, is come and invited to eat of Hashem's food, but it is in fact totally Hashem's food. Therefore, even according to the Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, only when it's alive does the owner have ownership rights over it. But after it's slaughtered, the people that come and are allowed to eat it do not have any ownership rights. So he would agree with the Mishnah that you cannot do Kiddushin with it. And this is precise in the language of the Mishnah, which says someone who does Kiddushin with his portion. You don't call a live animal a portion. Rather, you call only a animal that you killed and slaughtered and divvied up, that you call a portion. And so that's why it makes sense that even Rabbi Yossi would agree with this Mishnah. Tenor Banan. Now we have a nice, interesting story. Lachar petirato shel Rabbi Meir, amar lehem Rabbi Yehuda letalmidav. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, they're all students of Rabbi Akiva. So they're all colleagues. Now, after Rabbi Meir died, what are the students going to do? You have to remember, in those times, they didn't have these like big official yeshivot, like a school or a college today, or a yeshiva today. That's an established institution. And a big institution, when someone dies, a teacher or Rosh Yeshiva dies, the institution continues, and the students remain in the yeshiva, but they won't be able to take that teacher's classes anymore. They'll take a different class. In the times of the Tanaim, generally, maybe with the exception of the Nasi, but generally it was not an established single yeshiva, but rather small study circles that would gather around a certain sage in their home, in a local Bet Knesset, Bet Midrash. Sometimes they learned outdoors. Okay, so when someone died, then all those students would have to go and find and join another group in the other person's, other rabbi's house, and so on. Now, after the Rabbi Meir died, so the students are going to have to find a new teacher. Logically, it would be Rabbi Yehuda, also a great sage there. And Rabbi Yehuda told his students, he said, do not allow the students of Meir to come and join our study group, because they're not coming as sincere students. They are cantankerous. That's literally from the Greek kentru, right? They are piercing. They're coming here and they ask all kinds of side point questions just to cause anger and to make everybody confused. And so we don't want those students here. They are not coming to learn Torah, but rather they're coming to surround me with halachot. They're coming to attack me and, show me up. These are not sincere students. Okay, even though Rabbi Yehuda told the students, don't let the other ones in, nevertheless, Sumchus, a previous student of Rabbi Meir, he pushed his way and he entered into the Bet Midrash of Rabbi Yehuda. אמר להם, כך שנה לי רבי מאיר המקדש בחלקו בין קודשי קודשים, בין קודשים קלים לא קידש. And so, Sumchus quoted Rabbi Meir. This is my teacher Rabbi Meir said, someone who does Kiddushin with his section of an animal, of a sacrificial animal, whether it's Kodashim Kodashim or Kodashim Kalim, the Kiddushin is no good. Ka'as Rabbi Yehuda lehem, amar lehem, lo kach amarti lechem, ha'yikansu mitalmidei Rabbi Meir lekan, mipnei shekan teranim hem, v'lo motem ba'im, ela lekapecheni b'halachot hem ba'im, v'chisha ba'azara minayin. So Rabbi Yehuda got angry and says, who's that? Sumchus, you're the student of Rabbi Meir. Didn't I say don't let the students of Rabbi Meir in here, because they're only causing vexation and they're not coming to learn Torah. They're just coming to annoy me and surround me and attack me with halachot. And why does he object to this? Because can a woman come into the azara? Women are not allowed into the azara. And for the Kodashim, Kodshe Kodashim, those can only be in by Kohanim in the Azara. So there's no possible case where a Kohen would take Kodshe Kodashim and offer it to a woman and for her hand in marriage. The women aren't allowed to go there. And so what kind of just theoretical law is this? Is not a practical law that could ever happen, and you're just coming to annoy me with this halacha. And so now we have a big problem here. And another student of Rabbi Akiva is also there. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Yomiru Meir Shachav, Yehuda Kas, Yosef Shatak, Divrei Torah Mateh Aleha. What's going to happen? Rabbi Yosef says, well, Rabbi Meir, he died. Now Rabbi Yehuda, he got angry. And now they're going to say, Rabbi Yosef, he was quiet, he did nothing, while all this terrible, fighting is going on. And what about Torah? How's everybody going to learn Torah? Is it going to be such a distraction? People are just going to be fighting. I got to do something about this. And so he comes in to save the day, and he explains why actually this is an important halacha that could happen. Can a man accept Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter in the Azara? So there's some other Kohen who has a minor daughter, and so you might have someone come to that
that guy and say, right here, accept this on behalf of your daughter, and your daughter will be mikudeshet to me. So it is a possible case. Furthermore, any woman can appoint a shaliach. She can go to some kohen. Oh, listen, you're going tomorrow over there. Can you can you receive Kiddushin from this guy? And that guy comes and takes a piece of meat off of his shank bone that he's eating there in the Bet HaMikdash, and gives it to him. So you could have a case, you have to wonder, is this good Kiddushin or not? Or what if she pushes herself in? There's a parallel here, right? Simchos pushed himself into where he was not wanted. So too, a woman, even though they're not allowed there, what if she goes and rushes into the Azara, and while she's there, before the temple police escort her out, she receives Kiddushin from one of the Kohen there, from his Kodesh Kodashim. So all these could happen one way or another, and therefore, we do need to know the answer. And so this is a proper thing, right? Rabbi Meir, he died, he taught these laws, but this was a good law. Rabbi Yehuda, don't be so angry, right? He's not asking you just to make you angry. This is a real case that could happen, and we have to discuss. All right, so now that we know this is an important matter of discussion, we'll leave the extended discussion of this case until tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.